Good morning. I'm Denise Dryden talking to you each Sunday morning about the things I'm noticing in relationships, in energy, in our field, in every part of it. So it's in education, it's um, energetics, metaphysics, and psychology all put together into one place, right? So today I want to talk about the energetics of helicopter parenting, which I think is an interesting concept because we've heard these terms. We've heard hovering. The parents that hover, that don't really trust what their children are going to do, or they're trying to help all the time, right? We have the helicopter parents, which is the whoop 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 whoop. There's the helicopter, always with the spotlight, trying to figure out what the kid needs, right, at all times. There's the snowplow parent, which is the parent who sort of paves the way ahead of the child, right? So that no matter where they go, they are being helped, supported by this clearing that the parent. I heard another one that I used a couple of years ago that I thought was really fun. It's called curling. If you've watched the Olympics and you've seen the curlers, what they have is brooms, and what they do is they sweep the ice to try to get anything out of the way so that this curling ball can go further as it's floating down the ice, right? And I think that's pretty extreme, and that's fun to watch, especially when we think about it as parenting. Some of us will do anything to make sure that our kids succeed and go forward. So we worry, we watch, we anticipate, we protect, we guide, we help. We have fears in our bodies, and we do everything we can to protect our kid. So this is pretty prevalent in the late stage baby boomers, sort of those born between 60 and 64, 65. And then we start, really deep with the Gen Xers. The Gen Xers, mostly I think that they have become helicopter parents because they are raising crystal energy kids who have unique intelligences and different ways of doing life. And they've sort of thrown the education system and the sports system and everything on its ear because they don't adapt to institutional um expectations. My favorite is the linear executive functioning skill set that crystal kids just don't adhere to, and it sort of throws teachers, parents, grades, everything off as these kids are learning who they are. So it makes us as parents lean forward really hard, like, oh no, what if this doesn't happen? So earlier this week, um, I was listening to a YouTube interview with Shanaz Soni. She is a NASA engineer, an aerospace engineer working for NASA. And she is also part of the think tank and scientist gathering that Sasha Stone does. So she is constantly working on quantum physics and sort of quantum relationships and dynamics. And what she's doing is she's presenting, because she's a mom of 4 boys. She's a really cool lady she's writing a book. So if you want to check her out, I'll put a link to her in this description. She's presenting quantum physics in those kinds of relationships, right? And so my ears perked up when she started to talk about helicopter parenting, because helicopter parenting makes sense. So this is the example that she used, and I literally wrote it down word for word because it stopped me in my tracks. So here's the example of how quantum physics shows up in our relationships. You're sitting, I think she used the example of a bus. You're sitting on a bus, you're in a park, you're in a restaurant, a coffee shop, whatever, right? And you can sense, well, someone's looking at me. And you can feel it, right? And so when you notice that someone's looking at you, that your field has been impacted, you look around and you see this person. You can tell that this person was looking at you. Only as soon as you look at them, they look away because they don't want to get caught sort of watching you. But you could feel them for a long time before you even turned to find out where they were. So what this is our observation, our attention skills, our ability to focus, can focus on a field. And when we focus on a field, what happens is it impacts that field, and we can feel our field being impacted, right? So Shana said this one thing that I thought was really, really good is that observation affects momentum. So when we observe something, we change the momentum of what we're observing. So now we're taking sort of worries about a certain way that kids are learning, and we're bringing in, excuse me, this sort of quantum physics construct of the observation that we have, the way that we watch our kids affects their momentum. Right? So let's take this into parenting, which is, you worry, right? And you second guess and you anticipate and you watch and you entangle all of what you're doing into your child's field because you're a collection of moving electrons and they're a collection of moving electrons. And now they're starting to entangle and intermix. And so you're interjecting your electrons, your emotions, your feelings, your worries, your mental constructs into their field and into their system. Does that make sense? When we really look at it, that our ability to want to help, our ability to want to guide, um, actually interjects ourselves into another human being's field. It gets really interesting when we have to sort of look at that in a real honest way. So it's an entanglement of fields. And what it means is that there are no boundaries. There are really no boundaries on an energetic, what do we going to call it? Electron field management. There's nothing that says this is me and this is you. And so our children don't know the difference between them and you, between themselves, I think, is that the way I would say that? Between who they are and who you are. So it creates this dependence. And that dependence is that the child gets used to your full attention. They get used to you beaming on them all the time. They get used to you filling their field. They get used to, in fact, they actually grow up believing that your job is to manage their field, right? So they learn that they don't really need to pay attention. They don't really need to hyper focus on the certain things that society wants them to do, like school or getting a job or doing chores or anything like that, because you are paying attention for them. You're nudging them, you're reminding them. And so that self starting, that individuation, that sovereignty has been compromised because we are watching our kids too closely. So what happens is our kids bask in our attention, not their own, right? So they become, and this is where let's take it one more step into something that just sort of solidifies it all, which is they bask in our attention. They kind of feel love. They feel like they matter. They feel like even though they don't like it, even though they may be teased, even though they know that they're not actually doing their own homework the way, they're not managing their schedules, they're not learning cause and effect with chores and things. They love your attention, so they become dependent on this attention. When we shift or change, when we go into setting our own boundaries, pulling back, right, becoming less invasive, when we stop something, they start to flounder around like they're helpless and they start to fail and they wobble. And then they become manipulative and controlling, trying to get your attention back on them because they have learned that your attention means love. So if we are parents and we are teaching our children to be dependent on us, then any relationship that follows has to give them that same intense micromanaging helicopter relationship, or they don't feel love. This is terrifying when we really realize that our love isn't helping, the way that we love isn't helping our children. So when they flail and we jump in, I'm going to say that they're going to flail. They're going to fall. They're going to forget things. We're going to push them out and say, "Hey, you can go to camp. You can start this class by yourself. You can do this. You can do that." And then they start to flail, and then we jump in and we jump in around very specific things. And these are the things I've noticed in the last decade of coaching Gen X parents is that they're gonna jump in when grades are at stake. They're gonna jump in when it's about high school completion, at least get your high school degree, right? They're going to jump in when they feel like relationships are in danger. They really like when their children have special friends or boyfriend, girlfriend, or partnerships, right? And they're gonna intermingle into those relationships. They're gonna help with applications for jobs, for colleges, for schools. What else? When you're thinking about this, what are the things that when your child starts to flail, you jump in to try to help because society needs them to be good at that because you need them to start to grow up, but you're doing it with them because they're flailing, right? So this happens when we need to keep them on track, but it's also dependency based because dependency is having a really hard time being broken or separating without pain and discomfort. So there's going to be a very, very huge pain and discomfort, both from you as a parent and from the child as you start to disentangle this energetic field spilling, field merging, right? So I have four tips for you today on what we can do with this. Okay, so the first one is I'm going to start with this at all times. Get to know you, get to know yourself, get to know why you worry, why you're afraid. Get to know your field. And it starts with self knowledge. And, what do you do when you're worried? What do you do to calm those mental worries? What do you do to calm your field? And what is your field? Like, what is that vortex, that 3 foot, 6 foot vortex around you? That is you. And how do you know when you're in it and when you're predatory, like over into someone else's field, right? So, what do you do when you feel like you're failing at all of this? So get to know this, get to know you. This has to start with you. Second one is learn, now that you get to know you, how to stabilize. Like, what do you do when your child starts to crash? What do you do when you're nervous because you're getting close to educational deadlines, um, sleepovers, things that kids have not, some of our kids can't do just yet, or they do, and then they still need help, right? How do you calm your field? How do you identify and stay in this field and stay stable? And the boundaries that, hey, I need to separate from this. I need to step away from you. I need to take some time for me because I need to restabilize my field because I'm not any good unless I'm stable. So the first is to get to know yourself. The second is to stabilize. The third, boy, this was the hugest ouch I heard. I heard it started originally with Andrew Bartzis talking about empaths, but number three, your empathic skills, your ability to pay attention and hyper focus on your child and get into their field and figure out who they are and what they're doing. Um, we use this to help our children. We use this to figure out what their mindset is, what they need. And so when we're taking our empathic skills up and out and over into them, into their field, what's happening is that we're doing it to gather information. We're doing that so that we can protect them, but we're invading them, right? We are actually a predatory invasion into their field. And so what we do is we teach our children that it's normal for someone to come out into their field and manage them from the inside, which means that they're very susceptible for predatory energy, very susceptible to be to need attention that comes like this. Does that make sense? So when we're using those empathic skills and we're helping our child by reading them, what we're really doing is we're showing them all of the gaps that are open in their field, and we make it very difficult for them to say, stop, get out of my field, go away. I want to do this by myself. The hard one. Number four, use your field, your moving electrons to model. This has to be our role as parents. Is to model, this is who I am. This is how I make decisions. This is how I protect my field. This is how I nurture my field. This is how I lead. Because your child's watching you. It's the scan, record, and play back. And so they're watching how you do that, and then they learn that they have a field, and they're starting to manage it as well. So they see you, like advocate for yourself. They see you stabilize. And they have to and they learn how to do that for themselves. They actually like go, okay, so that's what it looks like. So no, mom, you leave me alone for a minute. I need quiet time to breathe. We can start with our 1.5 year, 2-year-olds, or 3-year-olds, or 10-year-olds, is to teach them how to be present, how to be embodied, and how to have boundaries. And we do that by doing that ourselves. We model it. We're present. We stay in our field, right? We're fully embodied, right? And we have boundaries as to what we will and won't do. Because what we're doing is we're teaching vibrational management. And we always have been. This is nothing new. This is the invisible modeling, replication, patterning systems that goes down through family systems. And whether we're cognizant of it, whether we've been trained in this, whether we are even believe that this is possible, what's happening is we're duplicating our belief systems onto our children. So let's work on that we believe we have a field, that we have a field that we are responsible for, that we can embody in and move with, so that we are doing empowered embodiment. Wow, this is phenomenal, and I'm so glad that we were able to talk about this topic today. This is what I'm doing with my coaching. I'm working on self-awareness, embodiment, everything that we need to do in order to make this work for ourselves and for our children. So if you want some more support with that, you can always find me on denisedragon.com, and all of my links are down below. Have a great Sunday, and I'll see you next week. Take care.